5 and by our crews that have been on the scene since early this morning. Over the next few minutes, we will try to update you as best we can on today's conflagration, which is now being compared to the Great Chelsea Fire of October 1973. Mary?
Well, Jim, it was shortly after 2 o'clock this morning when a Lynn police officer passed by in his cruiser and noticed smoke coming from the old Dyer leather factory, an 8-story building in the process of being torn down. The first alarm was sounded. The next 12 hours would be a nightmare, literally, for the more than 500 firefighters who would be called to battle a 10-alarm blaze that will go down as one of the worst in New England history from the standpoint of property damage. Flames rapidly engulfed the Dyer building and then began leaping to other close-by structures. It was a firestorm not unlike those which swept portions of London and Berlin during World War II. The intensity of the fire created strong wind drafts which whipped tongues of flame from rooftop to rooftop and blew sheets of water back into the faces of firemen. One after another, old brick walls began to crack and buckle. Then, with a snap, they would crash to the street as men scrambled to safety. Equipment had to be hosed down to keep it from becoming part of the growing casualty toll. One fireman suffered a broken leg, several others arm and leg lacerations. Some of these buildings had been recently converted to housing for the elderly. Police and firefighters miraculously managed to evacuate more than 700, some of them in wheelchairs. Emergency shelters were set up by the Salvation Army in the city of Lynn to house the homeless overnight. And so it continued until morning, when first light brought home the full extent of the devastation. 3 6-story and 3 8-story buildings had collapsed inward upon themselves. Lynn Fire Chief Joseph Scanlon called it the worst he had seen in 35 years. And a chief from Watertown said it was not like Chelsea in terms of total area, but probably worse in intensity because of the high-rise nature of the buildings. The army of firefighters came from as far away as Brockton to the south and the Merrimack Valley and New Hampshire to the north. Police had to cordon off large crowds which began to gather by dawn. The Lynnway was closed down as well as any street in the immediate area. This had been a source of Lynn's rejuvenated pride in itself, the heart of a $100 million redevelopment project. The Vamp building had recently been renovated to provide 250 apartments. People hope to move in next month. Firefighters desperately tried to set up a wall of water to save this structure, but by mid-morning, that battle had been lost. First a spark, then wisps of smoke, then flames shooting from all of the upper floors. The head of Lynn's renewal program called it like losing a member of the family. Lynn fire officials did a magnificent job of coordinating the city's largest firefighting effort and had to deal with a shortage of water. At one point, hoses were strung to nearby Lynn Harbor to help the situation.
We're in trouble on water supplies. That's no reflection on you. We had so goddamn much going. You know.
And our reservoir's dropping, so we know that, but we're handling it right now.
We must have 50 communities here pumping water this time. Since I talked to you last, we left an 8-story building up there. I know.
Lynn has had its problems with arson fires, and although that is not being listed as the official cause of today's blaze, it is being investigated. Part of the reason for the intense nature of the fire was the storage of various chemicals in these factories and warehouses. Lynn Mayor Anthony Marino prowled the devastated streets through the early morning and afternoon. He said it was like watching his heart cut out.
It's a tremendous loss to us. It isn't a question of money, it's a question of the years that were spent in rehabbing and designing and putting in grants from the various agencies of government.
This was the axis for Lynn's redevelopment, its big comeback.
Yes, this was a big comeback for us in the downtown area. Hey, we'll survive anything, you know, we're tough enough to do it, but it's a setback for us.
Firefighters' efforts to control the blaze are being further complicated by leaking gas. Boston Gas has several crews at the fire scene trying to turn off the gas mains to those burning buildings. They've been able to get to at least 20 of the buildings, but they've been unable to get into 4 or 5 buildings because of the intense flames. So a good portion of the fire is being fueled by escaping gas. Boston Gas officials say there is nothing they can do but wait until it's safe to go inside those buildings. Now, the Red Cross will be providing assistance to all of those affected by today's devastating fire. It's not known just yet how many people have been left homeless by the blaze, but the Red Cross says it's already helped nearly 400 Lynn residents. A spokesman says that donations of food and clothing have been very helpful, but that cash donations will be the most helpful of all. Now, those who have not yet contacted the Red Cross can do so by calling the Lynn chapter of the Red Cross at this number, 592-6660. Or you could mail your donation to the Lynn chapter. Their address, 73 North Common Street, Lynn, Massachusetts, 01902. Jim?
Governor King personally surveyed the damage in a helicopter late this morning, and upon arriving at the scene of the fire told Lynn Mayor Antonio Marino that he would do everything possible to try and recoup some of today's losses. Within a couple of hours, the governor called a news conference at the State House. He signed a bill declaring Lynn a disaster area, making that city eligible to apply for federal funds.
I, Governor, acting under the provisions of General Law, Chapter 33, and all other authority confirmed upon me by law, do hereby declare a state of emergency exists in the city of Lynn and authorize all appropriate state programs be applied to alleviate the damages, losses, and suffering from this conflagration. In addition, I intend to request all appropriate federal assistance given this 28th day of November, 1981.
It may take several days before any of that federal money comes to Lynn. In the meantime, the governor has ordered 200 National Guardsmen to assist with the relief efforts in Lynn. As they have done all day, Ron Galabin and Jorge QUIROGA are standing by with one of our News Center 5 crews live in Lynn. And here is their update. Jorge?
Well, Jim, the latest news from the city of Lynn after this terrible, terrible day is that Fire Chief John SCANLON has now declared that the fire is under control. But that effort was not able to be to take place until at least the fire was able to gut most of the VAMP building. That was a major showcase here with many, many apartments, about 350 apartments. The fire was took most of that building throughout the afternoon, but there was a hope that a portion of the building could be saved. But whatever apartments were not gutted by the fire now obviously have suffered heavy water damage. Estimated damage to the 4-block area that was affected by this fire in Lynn is now upwards of $35 million to $40 million. That's a big setback for the city of Lynn. In addition, we've got 1,200 to 1,500 people who now have lost their jobs. We're into the 16th hour of this firefighting effort, and it has brought to the city 500 firefighters from the entire eastern Massachusetts region, as far up as New Hampshire, as far down as Rhode Island. And let's now take another look at the valiant effort of these firefighters on the front lines and behind the scenes. Today's firefighting effort in Lynn was a well-coordinated model of cooperation. Much has been said, and rightfully so, of the 50 fire companies from as far as New Hampshire that came to the aid of the city. But while the public sees those firefighters on the line of duty, another equally important effort continues out of the public eye.
On Washington Street.
A Lincoln engine on Washington Street. They both need diesel or regular gas.
This is the Lynn Fire Department Alarm Headquarters. It is the nerve center of the battle against the worst blaze in Lynn history. It was to this office that the first phone call came in shortly after 2 a.m.
It's so hectic here that they actually don't have time to breathe, and we did have 3 men on when the original alarm came in. They called for help. Boston sent us apparatus. Every single town that in the surrounding area, and as far as New Hampshire, has sent us equipment.
So imagine a big thank you from Lynn to everybody in eastern Massachusetts up in New Hampshire.
Positively, we appreciate it very much, very much.
Meanwhile, well into the 16th hour of this blaze, efforts to secure the area continue. Lighting units have been brought from many fire departments throughout the region to keep the 4-block area illuminated through the night. A contingent of 200 National Guardsmen has also been put in place to help local, state, and auxiliary police cordon off the portion of the city that has been devastated by the fire. The emphasis is on security. Security from looters and security from possible injuries to bystanders from walls that continue to collapse as the fire takes its final toll. As an example of the tremendous firefighting effort that's taken place here today, DPW officials estimate fire units are pumping water at a rate of 1 million gallons an hour. Since the blaze began 16 hours ago, the low-service reservoir that feeds the fire hydrants of Lynn has dropped 4 feet. Standing with me now is my Newscenter 5 colleague, Ron Galvin, who's been out here all day. Ron, you've been following the evacuation efforts, the resettlement efforts. About 750 residents, mostly elderly, were evacuated early this morning. What's happened to them? How many still don't have a place to go tonight?
Well, Jorge, most of them were taken to the Salvation Army disaster shelter at City Hall Square. And since that time, most of them have been taken home with relatives and friends. However, a few still remain waiting word on where they'll be taken next.
Some of the elderly were confused and visibly worried. Many were asked to leave their homes immediately without taking anything more than the clothes they were wearing. I talked with a 92-year-old gentleman who was ushered out by firefighters so quickly he had to leave his wallet on the bed.
It really broke my heart. And pushed me out, my wallet's lying on the bed. I haven't got a penny. You know, I don't like to say that because people I know, friends of mine will bring me money, and I don't want them to. I don't want any money. And to tell you, God help the poor people, but it was a terrible thing to have coming. I really pushed you out the door. I didn't want to go so fast.
The Salvation Army, Red Cross, and Civil Defense are doing everything possible to reassure the elderly and to make them comfortable inside the shelter while they wait for word whether they can return home or if there will be a home to return to.
We're going to be interviewing the people, making sure that they have a place to go for the night or weekend, and if they don't, putting them in hotels or motels in the area. Starting Monday morning, starting tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, we will be opening up a long-term operation and interviewing the people on an individual basis as to what their loss was to help them replace lost possessions. Our major problem is going to be obviously housing, because most of these people are elderly and they were in elderly housing areas.
Now joining Ron Galvin and myself, we have Mayor of Lynn, Antonio Marino, and the Congressman from the 6th District, Nicholas Marvulis. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. It's been a long day. It's a very sad day. I know you've had a lot to do. And let's talk about the economic impact of this fire on the city of Lynn. Mayor Marino, we talk about a loss of $35 million to $40 million in terms of the damage from the fire, but what's the long-term damage to Lynn?
Well, the long-term damage is, of course, that it doesn't go on the tax roll, all these buildings which we depended on in the light of Proposition 2.5 to relieve this type of a burden. And most importantly, the 1,500 people that lost their jobs has a very severe impact, although we're going to do a great deal of work to try to get them employed in other businesses in the city. The other also very important fact is that this was the heart of the downtown area that was being revitalized, and it's just like ripping the heart out of a human being. It also has a terrific impact on the surrounding sections of the square, which depended on this rejuvenation of these buildings downtown to tie in with all our other plans. However, we're a city that has suffered a great deal of hardships in our years, and we're pretty tough, and we intend to come back. And the only thing I can say here, in addition to that, is that I have been amazed and overwhelmed at the tremendous cooperation. 42 cities and towns sent in equipment to help. The congressman here has been with me all day. We've been in touch with Senator Kennedy. The governor flew in by helicopter. We've declared our emergencies. The governor is going to ask for the area to be declared a depressed area. He's going to Washington. The congressman can explain that. The congressman and I and Senator Kennedy were on the phone just a half an hour ago, so I'll leave that portion of it to the congressman.
Obviously, this has been the showcase of Lynn. You've put a lot of time into this. Personally, how do you feel? How can you deal with such an emotionally devastating situation?
Well, it's my job. I mean, you don't roll over on your back and die when you're a mayor. That's what mayors are all about. In addition to that, the very deep support that we've had certainly encourages us a great deal. My feelings are more sorrowful for my staff members, the men who put this package together, the young fellows that have such a tremendous responsibility, enthusiasm in this type of work. Ed CLynn, the Community Development Director, Kevin Gainey, my city planner, and Bob Baker, my economic developer. All of these men worked hard to put this thing together, and again, then comes in, you know,
Let's talk a little bit about the help. What can we do now?
Congressman, I believe, and before you answer that question, you have some late word from Washington for us?
Yes, we did. We received, Tony and I both received word from Senator Kennedy. He called us from Florida, where he's joined with his mother. And he had talked with Max Friedersdorf from the White House staff, who in turn will be talking to Mr. Baker, and hopefully in turn call the president in California. Well, I can just give you a scenario at this point. We did talk with the governor at 2:15 this afternoon.
Can you give us an overall view of what federal disaster aid will mean for Lynn?
Well, first you've got to go through a process, and I think the governor, right through the mayor, the governor, and all the way up to the federal level, everything's been handled in a very fine manner up to this point.
What are the chances of Lynn getting federal aid?
We're going to get federal aid. There's no question about that. But my immediate concern right now is to let's relate to the things that the mayor mentioned a few minutes ago about the 1,500 unemployed and housing for the elderly and the poor, and trying to get the city back in coordination so that it can be workable. Tomorrow evening sometime, the governor or members of his staff will be going to Washington to present their case to the federal level. Senator Kennedy's staff and Senator Tsongas and myself and other members will be there or represented by staff to present our case on the federal level. Once we get that commitment from the president, that opens up many, many doors, and you eliminate the red tape, and therefore you have funding coming to your community for the immediate purposes, not for the long term. What I think we should do, and I will talk this over with the mayor and the staff and with other members, is to put together an entire package for the entire waterfront. But of course, the aesthetic beauty.
Are we talking, briefly, are we talking about a lot of money?
Oh, you're talking a tremendous amount of money. We have $50 million worth of damage minimum here today.
And a lot more time also to put this together.
And a lot more time, but I think what we can do, if we package the deal, and the mayor and I have talked at length about that this afternoon, make it a total package for the waterfront. I think we have a much better shot in Washington.
Thank you, Congressman Maroulis. Thank you, Mayor Marino. This is Ron Golleben and Jorge Quiroga reporting live from the Great Lynn Fire.
Ron and Jorge, thank you for those reports. In a sad bit of irony, today's fire in Lynn comes on the anniversary of the tragic Coconut Grove fire in Boston. It happened 39 years ago today, claiming 498 lives, and it still remains the country's worst restaurant fire in history. The Coconut Grove was Boston's most famous night spot. That particular night, 1,000 people crammed into the club, meant to hold 600. Many of them were fans from the Holy Cross BC game. No official cause for that fire has ever been determined, although a busboy who lit a match to change a light bulb is often blamed. More than 200 bodies were found piled in front of a revolving door that had jammed shut. The Coconut Grove suffered from many code violations, including a lack of exits and poor electrical wiring, but that tragedy did lead to stricter fire regulations. Jim?
Well, once again, Ron Golleben and Jorge Quiroga have been standing by at the fire since very early this morning. They will continue to stand by. We'll have a complete update on our late report tonight.
I'm Mary Richardson with Jim Boyd, and we hope to see you tonight at 11 o'clock.